Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
The morning started like any other. Jack had woken up early and was making a simple coffee while Brooke, still sleepy, played with her phone sitting at the table. They shared a small rented apartment in the city, where they lived modestly, without luxuries, but with some stability. As he stirred the sugar into his mug, Jack's phone vibrated. He looked at the number on the screen and furrowed his brow. It was the number of his father's lawyer, Robert Hartwell. He found it strange. He answered with the same calm tone as always, but his expression changed the moment he heard the words that were to come next. Robert got straight to the point, as was his style. He said he was sorry to inform him, but Douglas Whitmore, Jack's father, had died during the night after suffering a massive heart attack. That the body was already being prepared for the funeral, scheduled for the next day. Jack was speechless. The hand holding the phone began to tremble. The lawyer's words still echoed when he hung up, staring blankly for a few seconds. Suddenly, tears started to flow. It was as if all the coldness between him and his father had been swallowed by a silent wave of pain he hadn't expected to feel so strongly. Brooke approached immediately, alarmed. "Jack? What is it?" He looked at her with red eyes, struggled to breathe, and said almost whispering, "My dad died." For a moment, Brooke didn't know how to react. Then she hugged him, with sincere care, trying to offer some comfort. He rested his face on her shoulder and cried more, silently, as if breaking down a lifetime of unresolved memories. After a few minutes, he took a deep breath and said he would have to leave that very day. That the funeral would be where his father lived, in the interior of Texas. Brooke stroked his face and said without hesitation, "I'm going with you. You won't go through this alone." Then she added with a lighter tone, trying to ease the mood, "It's a shame I never met your parents." Jack looked at her with a half-smile and said that his mother had died when he was still a teenager. That since then, his father had closed off, becoming more rigid, harder, and the distance between them only grew over the years. "He wanted me to be like him, to take over the family business, to continue the legacy. I wanted something else. And in the end, we lost each other." They hit the road early in the afternoon. Brooke noticed that Jack remained introspective, looking out the window and saying little. She respected his silence, only asking from time to time if everything was okay or if he wanted to stop. When the car finally crossed the boundaries of the property, Jack's expression changed. She looked out the window and was visibly impressed. Ahead, there was a long dirt road surrounded by cultivated fields and, in the background, a huge house that resembled more a mansion than a simple rural estate. "My God! Is this where your dad lived?" she asked in surprise. Jack simply confirmed. "Yes. He owned all of this here. These lands have belonged to our family for more than 100 years. The farm was always his pride." Brooke couldn't hide her astonishment. "And you never told me anything about this," Jack shrugged. "Because I never wanted to be part of that. I wanted to follow my own path." They arrived just before dusk. The house was quiet, but the farm workers were already preparing everything for the funeral. Many of them had known Jack since childhood, greeted him with respect, some with sincere hugs. Jack thanked them, but avoided prolonging the conversations. He entered the house, looked around, and felt a strange mix of familiarity and discomfort. Brooke walked slowly, observing every detail. It was as if she was trying to absorb the grandeur of the place, and that lit something different in her gaze. The next morning, the funeral was held next to the farm chapel. A simple ceremony, but full of emotion. Few guests were present, mostly old employees, longtime neighbors, and a few friends of the father. Brooke stayed by Jack's side the whole time. He remained silent, looking at the coffin with a pain that mixed sadness, regret, and longing. While the priest spoke about the legacy of Douglas Whitmore, Jack couldn't help but think about how many conversations had never happened, how many hugs were denied out of pride, how many times he had had the chance to return, and didn't. That weighed heavily. After the ceremony, everyone was invited to enter the house for the reading of the will. The lawyer Robert was in the room, with a leather folder on the table. Brooke and Jack sat side by side, surrounded by curious glances from some of the attendees. Robert cleaned his glasses, opened the folder, and began reading with his firm and measured voice. The document specified various details about accounts, assets, and small properties. But when he reached the main point, the room fell into absolute silence. Jack would be the sole heir to the Whitmore farm, including the entire productive structure of the rural company bearing the same name, extensive cotton, corn, and wheat plantations, areas dedicated to fruit and vegetable cultivation, and one of the largest cattle ranches in the region. The property also included modern equipment, warehouses, a fleet of trucks, and contracts signed with major distributors in the country. The final valuation of all the assets, land, and property exceeded $150 million. Brooke froze for an instant. She tried to keep her posture, but her eyes betrayed a sudden sparkle, almost impossible to hide. Jack noticed. It was subtle, but it was there. A small reflection of shock and amazement. She quickly smiled, squeezed his hand affectionately, and whispered, "Wow, your dad really trusted you." Jack didn't respond. He remained thoughtful, staring at the paper in front of him. The inheritance weighed more as a responsibility than as a fortune. That land represented history, conflict, roots. And now it was in his hands. But what he still didn't know was that this inheritance would also bring to light hidden intentions and alliances he could never have imagined. And that the biggest test of his life was yet to come. Brooke seemed different after the reading of the will. Even the way she looked at Jack had changed. She became more affectionate, more present, more interested in everything related to the farm. She asked questions about the company, the contracts, the staff, the crops, and even mentioned that she wanted to understand better how the cattle raising worked. Jack, immersed in the grief of his father's recent death and still absorbing the magnitude of the inheritance, didn't have the energy to interpret that immediately. He was in a state between mourning and responsibility. For the first time, he found himself facing a gigantic structure, built over generations, that now depended exclusively on him. His head was full of commitments, deadlines, registrations, formalities. Meanwhile, Brooke appeared as a comforting figure, offering help with a tenderness he had never seen before with such intensity. A few days after the funeral, still staying at the main house of the farm, Brooke suggested that the two of them make plans for the future. She mentioned marriage naturally, as if just throwing the idea into the air, but watching carefully for each of Jack's reactions. He listened in silence, thoughtful. She reinforced that they were together before all of that happened, and that she had always believed in them as a couple. She said that the moment could be difficult, but maybe it was also an opportunity for a fresh start for both of them. Jack listened attentively. He liked her, of course. He was grateful for the support in the past few days. But that sudden excitement about marriage unsettled him. That night, Jack thought a lot. He recalled all the previous conversations with Brooke. Before the trip, she had never shown much interest in marriage. She had other priorities, talked about traveling, professional growth, freedom. Her tone had changed. And that made him reflect. The next morning, he made 2 coffees, sat down at the table with her, and went straight to the point. He said that if they were indeed going to get married, he wanted everything to be clear between them. That he intended to sign a prenuptial agreement. Brooke raised her eyebrows. She asked what he meant by that. Jack explained that what was his before the marriage would remain exclusively his, that there was no other reason but precaution. She laughed in a restrained way and replied that she didn't need that. That he was implying something serious, that he was doubting her feelings. "Do you think I'm with you because of the farm?" she asked. Jack remained firm, without raising his voice. He said he wanted to avoid future problems. That if the love was real, a document wouldn't change anything. The atmosphere became tense. Brooke stood up from the table, saying she was disappointed. She said he didn't really know her, that this kind of attitude only created barriers between them. Jack didn't try to convince her of anything. He simply said that if she wasn't comfortable with the agreement, they could rethink the idea of marriage. Brooke fell silent for a few seconds. She left the room. For the rest of the day, they hardly spoke. That night, she cried. She said she was hurt, that she had never imagined Jack thinking of her in that way. He just listened. He didn't want to argue. He was exhausted inside. The next day, Brooke came back with another attitude. She apologized, said she had exaggerated, that now she understood his side. She said she accepted the agreement, that their love was greater than any piece of paper. 2 weeks later, they officially married at the town hall. No party, no guests. An ordinary couple signing an ordinary document, to the eyes of those who didn't know the story behind it. Brooke held Jack's hand firmly and smiled. She said she was happy, that now they would start a new life together. And she had a suggestion. We could move here permanently. You have the farm to manage, and everything is right here. It would be perfect. Jack reflected for a few days but eventually agreed. The idea made sense. After all, he needed to be present to keep everything running. In addition, he was still trying to find some connection with the past, with his father, with the roots. Maybe living there would be a way to close some wounds. He accepted Brooke's proposal and, a few days later, moved their belongings to the Whitmore mansion. Both of their lives were officially starting anew, or at least that's what Jack believed. The first month on the farm was intense for Jack. The change required more than he had imagined. Meetings with accountants, talks with the old administrators, visits to the warehouses, inspections of the crops and the barns. The inheritance carrying the family name now weighed on his shoulders. There were important decisions to make, contracts to review, people to keep employed. He didn't allow himself to rest. It was as if his father were there, watching, waiting to see if he would be able to carry it all with dignity. Brooke accompanied part of the routine, but soon showed some disinterest in the administrative issues. She preferred to walk around the house, give opinions on the decoration, and suggest renovations in the recreational areas. From time to time she said that Jack needed to hire someone to handle the paperwork and focus on living better. He listened, but left the suggestion hanging in the air, without promising anything. Things took an unexpected turn when a man appeared at the gate of the property one Friday afternoon. His name was Darren Lewis, and he introduced himself as a neighbor. He said that his farm bordered the Whitmores for decades, that he had met Douglas from afar and had always admired his work. He wore a friendly smile and expressed himself confidently. He said he knew about Douglas's recent death and had come to offer condolences to the new owner. Jack was cordial. He invited him for coffee and listened to what he had to say. After exchanging some casual talk about the region, Darren commented that he had always been interested in buying part of the Whitmore farm, and that now, with the new management, perhaps it was the right time to present an offer. He opened the folder and showed documents, reports, and numbers. The offer was generous, more than $50 million for a significant portion of the productive area. Jack thanked him, but rejected the offer immediately. He said he wasn't interested in selling anything at that moment. Darren smiled as if he had expected that answer, praised his stance, and said he completely understood. He left as he had come, with friendliness and politeness. However, what seemed to be a punctual meeting repeated itself a few days later. Brooke became curious about the visit. She asked who he was, what he wanted, what had been offered. Jack summarized the conversation. Brooke didn't comment much at that time, but the topic would resurface with more intensity in a short time. The following week, Brooke started insisting with Jack to reconsider the offer. She said they were facing a rare opportunity, that the amount could be invested in their own businesses, travel, comfort. She mentioned that maintaining a farm of that size was a heavy burden, that perhaps his father had endured it because he was from another generation. Jack listened carefully, but remained unyielding. That land was more than property. It represented history. Every corner had marks of his grandfather, great-grandfather, and his childhood. Selling it would be like erasing part of his identity. Brooke argued that it wasn't about erasing, but evolving. That no one lived tied to the past anymore. He continued to be firm, without raising his voice, but with the same answer: nothing was for sale. What really caught his attention was Darren's behavior during the third visit. He was more relaxed, more intimate. He told jokes. And then, between one sentence and another, he mentioned something that caused immediate discomfort. He cited a comment Jack had made during dinner the previous week. A specific detail, which Jack had only said to Brooke. It was something trivial, but it revealed a private conversation. Jack reacted with a suspicious look, but kept his composure. He pretended not to notice. He steered the conversation to another subject and said goodbye as if nothing had happened. When Darren left, Jack remained silent for several minutes. He connected the dots in silence. Darren's words were a slip, a small mistake that only those who think they are above suspicion commit. That wasn't a coincidence. He was sure there was a conversation between them outside. Brooke appeared in the room shortly after, smiling, saying that Darren seemed like a kind, polite man. Jack merely nodded with a gesture. She commented that the coffee had been lengthy and asked if he had changed his mind. Jack said his answer remained the same. She laughed and replied that he was stubborn. Then she hugged him, suggested a walk, and tried to change the subject. Jack went with her, but his mind was elsewhere. Darren's words repeated in his mind like an echo. Jack's intuition, which until then had been suppressed by trust, now began to ignite. He decided not to confront anyone immediately. He preferred to observe. This time, though, with wider eyes and a heart on alert. Something inside him said the story was far from being just about land and inheritance. And that perhaps the greatest dangers were within the house. Brooke always said she needed some time for herself, that she liked to go out sometimes to breathe a bit away from the farm's routine. Frequently, she invented small trips to the neighboring town, known for its quiet streets, charming cafes, and artisan shops. She said she loved the slow rhythm of the place, the kindness of the shopkeepers, and that it helped her maintain balance. Jack never stopped her. In fact, he thought it was good that she had that space, since he himself spent his days immersed in the responsibilities of the farm. He never had a reason to suspect. He believed that she just enjoyed that lighter life. He never asked whom she met or how long she stayed. He simply accepted, because he trusted. After several weeks of Darren's last visit, Jack received an unexpected call. One of the region's largest suppliers of raw materials, who supplied both the Whitmore farm and Darren's property, asked to speak with him personally. The meeting took place discreetly, in the back of one of the warehouses. The supplier looked around before saying what he knew. He mentioned that during a visit to Darren's farm to finalize a new shipment of seeds, he witnessed something that left him uncomfortable. He saw Brooke there. Up to that point, nothing too alarming. But what caught his attention was the way they were. He said there was intimacy between them that jumped out. They were hugging, exchanging kisses, like a couple. Jack listened in silence, trying to control his breathing. He asked, firmly, "Are you sure about what you saw?" The supplier answered with the same firmness. "I am. I filmed it. I thought you should see it for yourself." He took his phone, opened the gallery, and showed the video. Jack watched in silence. It was short, but enough. Brooke was in Darren's arms, the two close, laughing and kissing freely. Without disguises, without fears, as if they owned that place. Jack's blood ran cold. The small town, the cafes, the innocent outings, everything made sense now. She wasn't going out to relax, she was going out to meet the neighbor who insisted on buying his land. Jack thanked him for the video, saved the file, and left there with a boiling head. He felt a mix of anger, disappointment, and above all, shame. Not just for being cheated, but for being deceived so easily. He called the lawyer without saying a word to Brooke. He asked to start the divorce process immediately and to have the documents ready as soon as possible. When everything was organized, he waited for the right moment. Brooke had just returned from another of her excursions to that charming little town. She was smiling, talking about a delicious apple cake she had tried. Jack called her to sit down and, with a calm expression, handed her the envelope. Brooke opened it and furrowed her face. She laughed, thinking it was a bad joke. "What is this, Jack?" she asked. He replied calmly, "Divorce papers." She tried to keep joking, saying that it didn't make sense, but Jack just took the tablet and played the video. Her face paled. The laughter disappeared immediately. She tried to deny it, then cried, then begged. She said it was a mistake, that she was confused, that she truly loved Jack. He listened in silence. When she finished speaking, he just said, "You signed that you wouldn't have any rights to mine. Now it's time to honor your own word." He stood up and concluded, "I want you to leave this farm by the end of the day." And then he left the room, ending what had begun as a marriage and ended as a calculated betrayal. Jack decided to take justice to the end. With the evidence in hand and legal advice, he filed a lawsuit against Darren based on the law of alienation of affection. It was a delicate case, but the recordings, testimonies, and the video provided by the supplier made the accusation solid. The lawyer built the case with precision, detailing how Darren's interference in Jack's marriage was not only emotional but also strategic. He had approached with a clear objective: to destabilize, conquer, and take advantage of a situation. The court recognized the damages caused, both moral and financial, and ordered a generous compensation in favor of Jack. The amount involved 6 digits and was seen by many as a message to those who think they can play with others' trust without consequences. But Darren did not accept the defeat with resignation. The public humiliation corroded him from within. The fact of being exposed in court, having his image tarnished, and losing money in a case he never imagined existed made him lose control. Anger took over him. And, on an apparently quiet night, he decided to give his own revenge. He jumped the fence at the back of the farm with some of his employees and carried with him 2 gallons of gasoline. The target was the main barn, an old building, full of history, that housed not only tools but also a large part of the Whitmore family's memory. He believed that destroying that place would be the final blow. That it would make Jack regret ever messing with him. What Darren ignored was that Jack had installed security cameras at all key points on the property. Not out of suspicion, but out of precaution. Since taking over the farm, he knew that a property of that size needed to be protected. The images of the attempted fire were captured in real time. A silent alarm was triggered immediately, and the security company directly called the local sheriff. The nearest patrol was less than 10 minutes away. When the police arrived, Darren was still trying to light the match. They subdued him, handcuffed him, and arrested him in flagranti for attempted arson and trespassing on private property. The news spread quickly through the town. The scandal became the subject of local radio stations, conversations in cafes, and posts by residents. Brooke found out about Darren's arrest through a message from an old friend from the city. His name was printed on local websites, social media, and even in a small radio report circulating in WhatsApp groups. The words, "arrested in flagranti," came like a hard punch. The man she had traded everything for was now in jail, exposed, ashamed, and defeated. The hope of a comfortable life, sustained by the choices she believed were smart, turned to dust. Darren wasn't Plan B. He was Plan A. The shortcut. And it had failed miserably. On the day Jack gave her the divorce papers and showed her the video of the betrayal, she understood there was no turning back. That same afternoon, it was Roberto, one of the farm's employees who had worked there since Douglas's time, who helped her pack her bags. he took her to the city bus station. Brooke didn't look back. She faked strength, but inside she felt the emptiness of someone who had bet high and lost everything. Arriving in the big city, she went straight to her parents' house. The apartment was small, simple, located on the third floor of an old building without an elevator. It had been years since she slept in her old room, now filled with old boxes and a single mattress. She sat on the bed and stared at the wall for hours. She, who dreamed of sophistication, now faced lines for basic job interviews. The words, "I need to start over," rotated in her mind like a painful mantra. Brooke had tried to plant flowers in a terrain she thought was more fertile, without realizing it was alien, stolen, and built on roots she herself despised. And in the moment she pulled out what was true to run after what shone more, she ended up alone, with empty hands and a silent name. Jack, on the other hand, was like a quiet tree that weathered storms with his roots well anchored to the ground. When the storm passed, he was still standing. Brooke reaped what she sowed, illusion and ambition. Jack reaped respect, justice, and peace. In the end, the man she thought was too simple proved that his calm was actually the perfect strategy of someone who knows how to wait for the right time to win. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.